Alrighty, I'm ready.
All right, everyone, enjoy your session.
Okay, let me know if you can see my screen. I should show my screen.
Ah, I can see it.
All right, perfect. Let me fire this off, and we'll get going.
Great.
Oh, let me go to the very beginning. Sorry, I was messing around here. All right. Well, thanks everybody for. Oh, do you see this actual slide deck?
Yes, Introduction to Windows Azure.
You see everything.
Yeah. I see your little notes panel too.
So thanks. What's that? I'm sorry.
I can see the notes panel too. I don't know if you intended to show that part.
Yeah, let me move that over, I think. See if I can swap that around a little bit. No. I want the deck on the one side. Okay, let's do this. Sorry about that.
No problem.
No, the deck's showing up on the wrong screen. Hold on a minute.
Sure.
We know how to get the deck on the right screen?
I know that on the GoToMeeting panel, under the Show My Screen button, you should be able to have a drop-down and select which screen you want to show, if that helps.
Let's do that one. Oh. There, is that better?
Ah, perfect. You got it.
All right, cool. Sorry about that. All right, let's get going. So again, thanks for coming. My name is Scott Klein, technical evangelist for Microsoft, focusing on SQL Azure now. So we've been calling it SQL Azure forever. In early June, they made a name change. So the new name is Windows Azure SQL Database. So but I will probably slip and call it SQL Azure throughout the deck, just because we've been used to calling it SQL Azure forever. So forgive me if I do that, but the new technical name is, they're trying to combine everything under a single umbrella, a single name. So the new name is Windows Azure SQL Database. And technically, once you've once you've called it Windows Azure SQL Database, you can continue to call it SQL Database. I think it might be a little confusing to people that haven't heard of SQL Azure type of architecture. So this is Windows Azure SQL Database or SQL Database. So, but I'll probably slip up a bunch of times and call it SQL Azure. But this presentation is going to focus on what is Windows Azure SQL Database. We'll start very low and looked like from the poll, a lot of people did not, or haven't played with it, or are just beginning to play with it. Which helps me because now we can, give me an idea of how deep I need to go, or how shallow I need to go. So, with that, let's dive right in. And what we're going to talk about is an overview of what really SQL Azure is. So. If you look at the progress of what of the whole SQL Server, you've got the physical, you've got the virtual. Microsoft not too long ago in early June announced the infrastructure as a service platform where we can run SQL Server in a VM in the cloud. Now they've been able to do that we've been able to do that for quite some time. But what it required is you to create your own VM on premise and then upload that into Azure. But with the new infrastructure as a service offerings from Microsoft in early June, you can do that right from the portal. You can create a VM with SQL Server, just to provision it from a gallery, a set of pre-existing images. So it makes it much easier. But we're going to focus on the platform as a service. Where Microsoft runs SQL Server as a service. So we'll actually get into that a little bit. And that's the whole focus of this, is Microsoft's platform as a service offering for SQL Server. So we'll talk architecture. We'll start talking about, what is SQL Azure, how to provision, how to get started with it, how to create and deploy your databases, how to secure your databases, both from the application side and the SQL Azure side, the database side. And then we'll look at some of the advanced capabilities or the advanced platform as a service services around SQL Azure. So with that, let's jump right in. So let's take a look at the architecture real quick. So on-premise, we're used to on-premise. SQL Server is a machine. We can touch it, we can smell it, feel it, right? We know what they are. We can name them Ratbert, Dilbert, Superman, Batman, things like that. We are familiar with an on-premise SQL Server environment, where we provision a new hardware, set it up, install SQL Server, multiple instances. This is kind of the paradigm that we're familiar with. But this is not SQL Azure. SQL Azure really is a TDS endpoint where we're logging into a TDS endpoint, and that TDS endpoint routes us to our appropriate database on the back end. We can't provision the hardware. We can't get to the physical hardware from that standpoint, but we can work with SQL Server, our databases, just like we can with on-premise, and we'll see some examples in some of the demos throughout this. One of the other polls that we did this morning was, what are the things that entice you or that makes SQL Azure or SQL Database enticing is SQL Azure really is the difference between physical administration and logical administration, and this is where Platform as a Service and SQL Azure really shine, in that Microsoft is really focusing on the physical administration, letting you focus on what you do best, which is the logical administration, just working with the database. And so so let's talk architecture just a little bit, and this will help understand how the physical and logical administration really separate here. So really it's almost the same. If you look at the current architecture for SQL Azure, it really is not that different from the on-premise architecture. So you still have the client layer, all your protocols, still talks TDS, so you can still connect it through WCF Data Service and things like that. So connect it through SQL Server Management Studio. So it's the client layer used by applications to communicate with the SQL database. So nothing really changes. No new tooling, nothing like that. You can still use all the great tools that you know and love. Underneath that, you still have the services layer. This is the difference. This is the one layer that's different between the on-premise, where we have this additional services layer. And this is the gateway between the client layer and the actual hardware or the platform layer on the back end. So when your connections go through, when you're connected to SQL Azure, they really go through this services layer. And the services layer, this is the, as you can see, it does three things: the provisioning, the billing and metering, and the connection routing. So typically when we connect to on-premise SQL Server, we connect to the actual, typically it's the machine name or the machine name / instance name. And this is not the same in SQL Azure. So when we connect to a SQL Azure database, we have to pass it a TDS endpoint, and it routes our connection to the right place. It goes through this services layer to route our connection. It also does billing and metering, meaning that it knows how many databases are up, how long they've been up, the sizes, things like that. So it's going to track all that information for us. Equally, it does our provisioning. So when we spin up a new server or spin up a new database, it knows where the least busy server is on the back end to create our new database, right? But underneath that, it's all the same. So you still have the physical layer underneath. So you got our SQL servers on the back end, all the management services. You do have additional agents, what's called the SQL Database Fabric on the back end, and these are agents that run on each physical database each physical machine. Their responsibility is to make sure everybody plays nice, because again, Azure is a shared environment, shared services environment. So my database could be on the same physical server as yours. So this fabric and this easy agents want to make sure that everybody plays nice. And then underneath that, you actually have the physical infrastructure layer, right? The physical hardware and operating systems underneath that. So really, this stack is very similar to what we see on-premise. The difference is the services layer, which handles our provisioning and connection routing and things like that, right? So again, there is physical hardware on the back end, but what we're seeing, but really, it's our connections are going through. We're not connecting to a physical database through our connections, right? We're going through this TDS, the services layer, through a TDS connection, right? So hopefully that helps. Feel free to ask any questions as we're going along. All right, so with that, how do we work with SQL Azure? How do we provision? How do we create things like that? So what I'm going to do is let's start with the basics. So again, SQL Azure is basically SQL Server served up as a service. It's fully managed. So again, this is physical administration versus logical administration. But don't get confused as to what SQL Azure is, or SQL Database is. This is SQL Server as a service. So it's not a NoSQL environment. It is SQL Server as a service. So the SQL Server that you know and love and work with on-prem. So tables, store procedures, views, triggers, indexes, primary keys, foreign keys, all that great stuff. It is SQL Server. The difference is that you just manage the logical administration and let Microsoft manage the physical, the upgrades, the patches, the hardware, things like that. The power behind this is basically the concept of being able to scale and provision very quickly and easily. If I need more instances or need to scale out, we'll talk about SQL Federations later on in the presentation. But the concept behind SQL Database is this: it is enterprise ready, and you do have support for high availability, and that's free. So when you spin up create a database in SQL Azure, you actually get 3 copies. You get your primary and 2 replica, and those are always in sync. So if that primary ever goes down, it spins up it takes one of your secondary, one of your replica copies, makes that your primary, and then creates another 3rd replica, and then synchronizes that, all behind the scenes, and that's free for the cost of your data, for the cost of the database that you provision, and that's hard. That's difficult to do, and very expensive to do on premise. So it is high availability automatically in SQL Azure. And again, scalability with Federation, we'll talk about that. So it is, again, SQL Server served up as a service. Provisioning these are very simple, so there's 2 ways you can do this. Through the management portal, allows you to provision a server and databases very easily. Just click a server or database, provision your server, click add, provision your servers and your databases very easily and quickly through the portal. You can also do the databases through SQL Server Management Studio. We'll see how to do that. We'll see some of the naming conventions, right? So again, like I said, you can't name your servers Batman, Superman, things like that. It does give you a database name for you. This, again, how it does its connection routing and things like that.
Scott, we do have a couple questions if you have a moment.
Absolutely. Fire away.
The first one is, what are IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS?
Okay, so IaaS is infrastructure as a service. This is more the hardware side. So IaaS is infrastructure as a service. PaaS is platform as a service. And was it SaaS? I think that's software as a service.
Okay.
So infrastructure as a service you can think of in terms of this is the SQL in a VM, right? The virtual machine technology, right? Where we can easily spin up a virtual machine with SQL Server in it. You know, that's the infrastructure as a service. The platform as a service is what we're talking about here. Is SQL Azure, right? It's software served up as it's Microsoft provides a platform and SQL Server, and you just work with the database. So more SQL Azure. Software as a service is a little different. That's things where the vendor provides the entire stack, right? So like Hotmail would be software as a service. Office 365 is software as a service, where the entire stack is provided by the vendor. So hopefully that answers the question. Yeah,
that's great. We have a couple other questions.
Sure.
Is Azure PCI DSS compliant?
So there is some compliancy. I'm not familiar with the PCI. You said DSS?
Yeah.
I'll put my contact information up at the end. Email me that, and I'll find out. I know that we get questions like that all the time about HIPAA compliancy and PCI compliance, and I think we are PCI compliant to some degree, and we just announced some other compliancy, and I can send out that information as well. I'm not familiar with DSS, so I will definitely find out and send that out.
Okay, perfect. We just have two more. How often is the data replicated over to the other servers?
So you mean the other? I'm assuming that he's talking about the replicate databases.
I believe so.
And that's frequent, so all the time. So when you write to every time you write or update, it's replicated automatically. So the concept is that the transaction is not considered complete until all three databases are up to date. Now that doesn't mean that once that it waits, like when you write, your application doesn't need to wait until all three are in sync. So it's not synchronous like that. Once you write to the primary, it'll return to your application, and you can continue to work. But behind the scenes, that transaction for SQL Azure is not considered complete until all three. So they're immediate, right? But from a SQL Azure standpoint, it's not considered complete until all three are up to date.
Okay. And here's the last one for now, guys. I know some more are coming in, but I'll ask one more and then let Scott continue, and maybe we can take some more at the end.
Sure.
It is, do you performance tune this the same way as an on-premise database?
I'm sorry, ask that one more time.
Do you performance tune this the same way as an on-premise database?
Oh, absolutely. Again, this is SQL Server, so you're going to performance tune this the exact same way, right? You're going to look at, sorry, I apologize. You're going to look at your query plans, your execution plans, things like that. You're going to performance tune this the exact same way. Nothing changes because you want the, in fact, the way that SQL Azure actually, because what people do is, let me just say it this way, you can hide a lot of bad SQL on-prem, right, by throwing hardware at it, by throwing more memory, more CPU, things like that, right? You can't do that in SQL Azure because...
Oh, Scott, you faded out there.
Oh, sorry. Let me say that again. So you can't hide bad SQL in SQL Azure because, again, this is a shared environment. So and there's a lot of things. We'll talk about this in a little bit because you can do reserve resources and things like that. But SQL Azure actually, in some ways, forces you to write better SQL because you can't just hide that. You can't hide bad SQL in SQL Azure. So you're really going to want to write and tune it to the right. Use your query statements, use your execution plans, use your things like that to make sure that your queries are run the best, right, or run or performant, right. So yes, you will tune this the best, just like you will on-prem, right. And we'll see that. I'll show you. We'll see how you can do this in SQL through SQL Server Management Studio and things like that.
Okay, great.
Right? All right. So again, let's get into server provisioning. So you can log into the portal, create your database server there, specify credentials, and we'll talk about security and how SQL Azure is secured. So there is Microsoft is very serious about security and securing that data, and so there's multiple ways to secure this data, both through the portal, through your normal, through logins and user IDs and things like that. But so there's multiple ways, and we'll look at that. And then lastly, there's other ways to provision, right? So SQL Azure does have an API, so you can use PowerShell to provision your servers and your databases. You can use there's a management API that allows you to do this. So there's multiple ways to provision your servers and your databases, right? Not just through the portal, but you can do it programmatically. You can do it through SQL Server Management Studio, and we'll see a lot of this, right? All right, so let's jump out, and I'm going to fire up SQL Server Management Studio and the portal. So let me jump out of here, and let me share SQL Server Management Studio. Actually, so you should see SQL Server Management Studio, correct?
Yes, I believe so. I see you're logged in for it.
Yep, perfect. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually go into the portal here, and when you provision your Azure account, it requires you to provision a live ID or use a live ID. So I'm going to log in with one that I've got, and log in here. And so this is the new portal that was announced in June. There's the previous portal still exists. This is in preview, so this will be released later this year once a lot of the functionality comes. But you can use, this is available if you sign up for an Azure account. So you'll notice here that I can have all my items. So there's my websites. Well, these are my Windows Azure websites. I've got virtual machines here. We do our this is our infrastructure as a service, our VMs. So it allows me to, again, if I want to provision a new VM virtual machine, I can say from gallery, and one of the things I can do is provision a SQL Server 2012 VM, right? Spin it up, and within just a matter of seconds, I've spun up a VM with SQL Server 2012 on it. But here I'm going to do SQL databases, and notice that I've got quite a few databases on here, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on server, and I can provision a new server just by going new. Let's just do it this way. I'm going to click on, make sure I got servers, and say add, right? And so I'm going to provision a new server, and really what it does is I give it a login name, and this login name is very much like SA. You can equivalent this to your SA account because this is the actual server admin. So SQL Scott, we'll give it a password. Do another password, and then what subscription, and you can have multiple subscriptions. I'm going to put this in my Microsoft subscription, and then what region do you want to provision the server in? Now there's quite a few, and so again these are large. We have several data centers throughout the world. We've got 4 in the U.S., 4 in Europe, and 4 in Asia, and these are large data centers. You can obviously you want to pick one that's closest to you or your client. So I'm going to pick West US, and pay attention to this checkbox here, allow Windows Azure Services to access the server. We'll come back to that, but remember that checkbox. And I'm just going to click OK. Right, and so you can see here it's provisioning a server, and already done. Right, there it is. And so let's actually go into that, and let's look at the actual server name. Now you notice it's already got one database, and that's master. So every server you have access to master, but unlike on-premise, you do not have access to master. Right? You can't modify it, you can't touch it. It does show up in your databases, but you can't do anything with it. Okay, but notice my database name, which is here. This is actually my database name. So this is my dashboard. I can see all but my actual server name is this. So you notice that I couldn't name it. I couldn't give it a name, but this is my database name. So I can now on here go ahead and create databases. Let's go to this server here. Nope. So I find out the one I created. Where's my database? So notice I've got a bunch here. There we go. That's probably it. Let's make sure I've got that one. Is that my north? Is that my west central? That's east US. So notice I've got a bunch of servers here that I've been playing around with. So that's north central. So notice that I've got a number of databases, but we can just pick one and play with it. So here's West US. It provisioned this one. There's my server name. I couldn't name it, but we can now go in here and create a database. I'm going to create a database, and I can give it a name. And now notice I have 2 editions. I've got web and business. Web allows me to create a 1 and 5 gigabyte size. I can set collation on each one of those databases. Or I've got business, which allows me to do a 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100, or 150 gigabyte database. So the question you're probably asking yourself is there a functional difference between web edition and business edition? And the answer is absolutely not. There is no physical difference. There is price differences for each of these, but honestly, there's no functional difference. So, and I'll pull up a slide that shows pricing for these databases, right? So I'm not going to create one through here. I'm going to show you how to do this through SQL Server Management Studio. Because I can click OK. Actually, let me just do this. Let me just test and click OK. right? So now it's creating this database, provision done, right? But beyond this, I really can't do much through here, right? So there's my database. It's already created. Okay, I can actually go in and look at from the dashboard and see everything about this, but really I can't do much through this portal. But let me fire up SQL Server Management Studio and log in. And now notice that when I log into SQL Server Management Studio to SQL Azure, I have to pass that entire server name. So that randomly generated server name is going to be this. Let's go back to the servers, right? It's going to be this server name, but I have to pass that entire thing in order to connect. So here's one I've been working with. There's my admin name, and I'm going to specify that one. So I'm going to type in my password. It'll allow me to connect, right? And so now I've got SQL Server. I'm connected to my SQL Azure databases right through SQL Server Management Studio. So there's my server connected. There's all my databases, and I can now work with these just like I can with on-premise. The only difference between this and on-premise is that, if I connect to on-premise, let me do that real quick. Right, there's on-premise, and if I say, let's just pick a database and say new table, right? I get the new table, I get the wizard, right? Which is nice. If I do that through SQL Server for SQL Azure, let's just pick one, Northwind, new table, right? I get code, right? So a lot of the dialogues right now don't work with SQL Azure. So when you work with SQL Azure, hopefully you like to write T-SQL, because that's what creating database, creating tables, creating stored procedures, things like that. It's all through when you right mouse click and say new table. This is what you get. You get the template. So, but again, I can create a database. I'm simply saying create database scooter, right? Oh, I have to be in master. Sorry. Let's go back and do that again. I have to be, so yeah, again, obviously you have to be in master. So we'll say new query. Hopefully this will connect us to master. Yep, we're in master. So create database scooter, right? And that's it. So this is what's great, is because it's the physical and logical administration separation. Create a database. I don't have to specify where the file groups are and things like that. So this syntax just created me a 1 GB web edition. If I want to specify anything different, I can say edition equals business, right? Because we saw there was business and web edition. Max size equals 150 gigabyte, right? And that's it. So we execute that. We get 150 gigabyte database, right? So that's really it. That's the syntax for creating a database. But the syntax for table is just like you would do on-premise, stored procedure, on-premise, things like that. So that really doesn't change. So through that, we've provisioned a server. We've created a database. So hopefully I can go into more detail after if we want. Now, before we go on, let me point out one quick thing. You can use, obviously, SQL Server Management to do a lot of things, but through the portal, notice that there's this manage URL. Let me pick this database, this server here. There's this manage URL, and if you go out to that, it actually opens up another, it's a Silverlight portal, and think of this much like, this is a web-based SQL Server Management Studio, but it's not full-fledged. So if we log in here real quick, I'll show you just briefly what it does. So it allows you to do things. You can create tables, store procedures, views, things like that. You can execute queries. It's a great user interface. I can do administration and design, so I can do a new query. I can create a table or a store procedure or a view. I can do a new query against some of my tables. So it's a great. I can actually look at execution plans and estimated execution plans, things like that. So it's actually really nice. So it's a great tool to allow me to do a lot of administration things in the web, but you can't do things like plans and things like that, right? So that's not there. But it's a great utility if you want to do web-based, right? All right, so we're running out of time, so let's keep going here really quick. All right, so we saw how to create and deploy. So let's actually jump out and create a database as you saw this, right? And the great thing is that Microsoft, and I think I alluded to this earlier, Microsoft does not ask you or make you learn a whole new set of technologies, right? So all the tooling that you currently use works. So the T-SQL, .NET, ADO.NET, Java, PHP, all these protocols still work. All the frameworks like OData, Entity Framework, and Hibernate, all that still works. Because you're connecting to SQL Server, it is SQL Server in the background, so and all the tools. So all the familiar tools and technologies you use still work against SQL Azure, right? ADO.NET, ODBC, all those great technologies still work. Again, let's talk about a SQL Server comparison really quick. So again, it is focused on logical versus physical. You cannot right now get to the database and the log files. It is doing logging for you in the back, so there are transaction logs in the background. You can't get to those, but they are there. One of the features that will be released later on this year is the ability to do a point-in-time restore. So the ability to go back and say within a 2-week window, allow me to restore from this point in time. And it actually do that from the log files. But the database and log files are placed automatically. We did talk about the replicas. Those are maintained for every database. Doesn't matter how many databases you have, you'll have replicas for every single one of those databases. One of the differences, though, between on-prem and SQL Azure is that every table does require a clustered index. And this is because this is what it uses in the back end to do the synchronization, to keep everything in sync. It is clustered indexes. So every table in SQL Azure does require a clustered index. Again, the maximum database size is 150 gig. You will continue to see this increase as time goes on. Up until just, I think it was last December, the biggest database size was 50 gigabyte, right? So they're continually adding infrastructure to increase the database size. Let's talk about unsupported features right now. There are a few things like service brokers not supported, SQL agents not supported, native encryption's not supported, full text search isn't there yet. The CLR is not there, and let me clarify some of that. When we mean CLR, a lot of the CLR data types are supported, like the XML data type, spatial data type. A lot of those, all of those are supported. But when we say the CLR, we're talking the SQL CLR here. We're talking like creating a SQL CLR managed code, a DLL SQL CLR managed code, and hosting that in SQL Azure. That's not supported yet. Full text search, distributed queries, distributed views, things like that. Those are not supported. And a lot of the features you'll see will be coming. They're trying to figure out how best to implement a lot of these, like native encryption. But since those are based on certificates, how do you do that in a shared environment type of thing? So they're working on that. So backup and restore we'll actually talk about, because that's sort of supported through the things like point-in-time restore. A lot of the import-export services we'll talk about allow you to do backup and import of databases, import and export of databases. So that's sort of supported. What they mean here is that you can't, do a backup to a device and then, or transactional backups, differential backups. Those aren't there yet as well. All right, enhanced tooling. So we saw this just now. So through the SQL Database Management Portal allows you to do a lot of the features you can do in SQL Server Management Studio, create tables, view, store procedures, do database tuning or query tuning, things like that. That's there. I forgot to show when I had SQL Server Management Studio open, you can still write a query, do a query plan against that, estimated and actual, right? That still works. So you'll still want to performance tune in SQL Azure just as you would on-prem. Again, through the portal, this new SQL Database Management Portal, you can do a lot of that through there as well. In SQL Server 2012, they introduced SQL Server Data Tools. This is a nice way to work with SQL Azure through Visual Studio as well. You can develop and test in both connected and disconnected states. This does come free with SQL Server 2012 and Visual Studio 11, but there's an additional download if you're using prior versions of SQL Server Management, SQL Server, and like Visual Studio 2010 and things like that, right? But there's a nice way to work with SQL Azure right through Visual Studio. So there's a lot of great tooling around SQL Azure if you're familiar with SQL Server data tools and things like that, right? And then deployment. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the DAC, the Data Tree Applications, and the DAC framework. This is slick, and I'm going to show you this just really quick. This is awesome because in SQL Server 2012 they really made database deployment really, really easy. This comes with free with SQL Server. It does come with many versions of SQL Server. But for the DAC, for SQL Server 2012, DAC 2.0 actually includes what's called a backpack. DAC is just a unit of work that includes a schema, but with 2012 and the DAC Framework 2.0, they now have what's called the backpack, which includes a schema and that schema and data. So we'll see that really quick. So actually, let's do that right now. Just a very brief demo because we still have a lot to cover. So let me jump out to SQL Server right now and show you. So I've got on-premise a number of databases, and what I want to do is I want to take one and migrate that to SQL Azure, for example. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this expenses database, and in the SQL Server 2012, we now have this feature called Deploy Database to SQL Azure and Export Data to Your Application. And I could go right to SQL Azure, for example, and say, connect. It'll go. Where's my database? It'll deploy this right to SQL Azure, and it does this through creating a backpack actually, and then extracting that. But let's do this the other way. And what I want to show you is the Export Data to Your Application, which actually allows you to take this database. I can save it to local disk, or I can actually save this to Windows Azure, which is blob storage, right? What part of the other parts of Windows Azure is their Windows Azure storage. So you got blobs and tables and things like that. And I can actually take that and export this to a backpack. And notice that the account is, or the extension is already backpack. So I can save this and export this to a backpack. What I'm gonna change this already. And let me just go to dtemp, and I'm gonna call this expenses, right? Actually, I'm going to save this to local disk that way. Let me just do it that way. I've got one out there. I'm going to overwrite it, and I'm going to say next. Yep, let me overwrite it, finish. And what it's going to do is it extract everything, and this is going to include data, right? This will only take a few minutes, or not even that long. It should just take very brief. There we go, already done. Now that I've got my backpack, and this backpack includes schema and data, I can then go into my SQL Azure, right mouse click on databases and say import data to your application. Point this to the backpack I just created, and notice that it's going to automatically generate the database for me. I need to pick the database edition and size. So if I've got a 10 gig database, I want to make sure I pick something that's going to that database will actually fit into. So this is a very small database, and then at that point, done. Right. So I just click finish, and now it's creating this new expenses database for me. It'll import it, and already done. So we'll come back to this because we still have a lot to cover, but it's migrating to SQL Azure is as simple as this. So I could have gone right to SQL Azure through deploy right to SQL Azure. The backpack actually allows me to be much more flexible. If I want to deploy this to multiple servers and things like that, I would do a data tree application, right? So I've got great flexibility and a number of methods through for migrating to SQL Azure. Now again, if you've got SQL Server 2008 R2 and prior, obviously these menu options are not there. But out on CodePlex, and I can show you these out on CodePlex, there are utilities that actually use the DAC framework that allow you to do the same thing through a command line. So if you are interested, I can send you that information as well. So there you go. A pretty small database, but within just a matter of a minute, it was able to migrate that database. All right, let's keep going. Is there any questions we want to jump into?
Oh, we have a lot of questions.
What's that?
So we have a lot of questions. So I'll pick a few.
Do you want me to keep?
You're fading
Okay.
in and out. I'm not sure what's.
It might be my. I'll try to not move around so much.
Okay. Yeah, if you want to keep going till the end, and we'll just get through as many as we can because you've got about 20 questions right now.
Oh, good grief. Okay, so let me. I'm almost done. So do you want to save the questions till the end?
Yeah, we'll do that.
Okay, so let me just keep going. All right. So we talked about let's talk about security. So there's several ways to secure our database, both on the server and then within the database. So really the only thing that changes, there's a couple things that are different with SQL Azure. From the application standpoint, you really would just want to use the same way, but we'll talk about these in a second. So from the server side, again, SQL Azure only supports SQL authentication, so there's no integration authentication, and that's right now because there's no such thing as domain in Windows Azure. Now with IaaS infrastructure, that's changing a little bit, but right now SQL Azure only supports SQL authentication. That admin that we created when we provision our server is, again, much like SA. And same thing, just like on-prem, you're going to connect to master to administrate to manage your create and manage your logins. But because of the logical and physical differences, some of the roles are a little different. So in SQL Azure, you'll see a login manager role and a DB manager role, and these are used to manage security roles for both the logins and the databases. These are server-level security roles to manage logins and databases. But again, from a security standpoint, it is much the same. So I create a login, base that user off on a login, assign that to roles and permissions, and do grants and things like that. So all that is the same. That really doesn't change. Really, the only difference is there are role differences. So like the login manager role, the DB manager role. So you might see some roles from SQL Server that aren't there in SQL Azure just because of the difference in nature from a platform as a service, right? But again, I can do a create, alter, drop. I can do from a database and permissions and things like that. So all that is the same, right? That doesn't change. So it's just like logins require an associated user account. So logins and roles and all that's still the same. The DBO has full rights, so that user I created, that admin user, it does have full rights to the database. So again, I guess the messaging here is that really a lot of it's the same. The same security really doesn't change. You will add users through the SP add role member to grant privileges, so that might be a little different. So, but you'll notice that logins and users are assigned to roles, and you can do grants and create, alter, drop permissions and grant and all that. So that's the difference. Now, I asked you earlier to remember that checkbox when we provisioned our server, and that's because again, one of the things that SQL Azure applies is what's called, nope, I passed it, went too far, is the firewall rules, right? So in SQL Azure, you cannot connect to a database until you do a firewall rule, or until you specify your firewall rules. And these are IP address-based rules that say who can connect to this server. And by default, there's no rules, so everything is turned off. And that checkbox, when I asked you to remember that checkbox, so not even any Windows Azure services can connect to SQL Azure until you check that checkbox, right? So it is closed by default. Nobody can get to it. And the way to do this, let me just jump out real fast, is to go into the portal. Let me go back. Go back to yep, I want to leave this page. Let me go back to our portal, and let me go back to our databases once they're provisioned here. And I'm just going to pick a server, and I go to configure. And one of the things I have over here is these are my firewall rules, and these firewall rules basically state who has access to my server. So let's pick one that doesn't have one. Do we have any rules on this one? None. Okay, so I'm going to connect to this server. So let me go back here. I'm going to grab this, right? And then I'm going to go to SQL Server Management Studio, and I'm going to try to connect to this server, right? So I'm going to say there's the server, and I'm going to try to connect, right? And this should come back and say, no, don't make a liar out of me. Yep, because my IP address is not, I haven't defined my IP address. So I'm going to click OK. I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to go to Configure. And I love this tool because it tells you what your current IP address is, right? So I'm going to copy. I'm just going to say test, paste, paste, and it can be arranged, right? I can do something like, 1 to 255, for example, right? But I'm just going to do this one, right? Click save, right? So there's my rule. I can now come back here, click connect, 0 to 126. Just making a liar out of me. 0. So let's do 1 to 255. Save. Oh, yeah, there we go. So now we should be able to connect. Right, done. Right. That one, the one IP address should have worked. I don't know. Maybe there's some routing going on in the back end. Right, but again, so you notice that it didn't allow me to get in until I specified an IP address or an IP address range. So it by default locks everything out until I specify who has access, right? So that's important to know because by default it's very secure. So let's I want to do that over here. So let's go back. Let's continue real quick. I'll take this over here. Let's there we go. All right. So there's the firewall rules. So it basically defines who has access and who doesn't. Now, from the application standpoint, again, nothing really changes. This is your standard connection string works. The only difference is you need to specify your server in the format that we saw, so server.database.windows.net. And then you also need to specify a couple other parameters, trusted connection equals false and encrypt equals true, that because all connections to SQL Azure go over SSL. Everything's over 443, right? So what's awesome is that I won't show this right now until I go back on the portal, but you can actually copy paste connection strings right from the portal into your application and just change the username and password, and you're all ready to go. So they made it very easy. Some considerations and best practices really quick. So again, the login is login at server name. So it'll be like SQL Scott at, and then that part right there, just the server, right? So that's going to be your login name. Idle connections. So Microsoft is going to make sure, again, that everybody plays nice. So idle connections are going to be terminated after 30 minutes. Long-running transactions are going to be automatically terminated after at least 24 hours. If you've got something that's running a long time, it's automatically going to terminate those. But you also want to make sure that it does monitor for denial of service attacks, so it does guard against those things. So if it determines that if something's funky, it's going to going on, it's going to kill those connections as well. Any failovers events will terminate connections as well. We'll talk about throttling later. Throttling, this is where I talked about in the architecture. I talked about the SQL Azure agent. These agents, and if you're taking up too many resources, it will throttle you back. So again, from a best practices perspective, you want in your application you want to implement retry policies. And Microsoft has in the patterns and practices has what's called the retry framework, and I can send you that information as well. So there's a lot of things that you really want to take in consideration as you're coding and building for SQL Azure. So and again, because of latency, because you are going across the internet, you want to be considerate of that as well. So again, implement retry logic and really build for these types of environments. All right, so that's SQL Azure. Let's really get into, because we only have a few minutes left, let's get into some of the advanced capabilities that these are the advanced services or ancillary services that work with SQL Azure. And really they're a lot of reporting and synchronization and scalability options. So I won't demo a lot of these. I'm happy to come back and demo these later on if you'd like, especially from a lot of people are interested in the scalability of SQL Azure using SQL Federation. So I'm happy to come back and do that. But let's start talking about these. So from a reporting standpoint, what we've done is we've taken SQL Server reporting services and made that a service as well, a PaaS service. So it's actually called Windows Azure SQL Reporting, and it is SQL Server reporting services as a service. So instead of provisioning your reporting server and server on-prem, go into the portal, provision your server, and done. So the great thing is that a lot of the tools, all the tools that you use now through BIDS and SQL Server Data Tools work. So the same concept works. You open these tools, provision create your report. The only difference is instead of deploying to your report server on-prem, you deploy to the report server in Azure. Done. You can still use the same tools to create and access your reports. You're just doing it through SQL Azure. And the benefits around this, again, are the high availability and scalability. So I can, based on my needs, I can scale to as many report servers as I want and then scale back. And I provision a server within just a matter of minutes, right? So there are some differences between on-prem and SQL Azure in that some of the data sources in data sources, for example, you can't do a DLL for report server or as a data source in SQL Azure. So there are some differences, and we can talk about that later if you'd like. But again, SQL Server reporting services served up as a service, easy, quick provisioning, a lot of the scalability. So I don't need to, I can scale up and provision very rapidly. Now, Data Sync. So anybody on the line that has lost a lot of hair over replication will be glad to know that SQL Server Data Sync services, Windows Azure Data Sync, SQL Data Sync, is a great way to supplement or replace. I shouldn't say replace replication. So this is the Microsoft Sync framework, or the .NET Sync framework served up as a service. So it allows me to do data synchronization through hub and spoke technology, very easy, very quick. I don't have to, no code. I think the key point here is that there's no code. I can set up a synchronization from, I synchronize between SQL Azure databases. I can synchronize between SQL Azure and on-prem. I can do and set this up all within a matter of minutes with zero code, no code. And it does bidirectional synchronization. It does conflict handling. I can apply filters, get very granular as to what gets replicated and where, what gets synchronized. There is logging for troubleshooting. So it is a very nice way to set up and synchronize data between multiple locations, whether that's with SQL Azure or on-prem. Very easy to set up, no code, data synchronization technology. And lastly, database scalability. So this is the ability to, this is what a lot of people are interested in as well, is, how do I scale in the cloud? And the answer is SQL Federation. So it allows me to scale to hundreds of nodes through multiple partitions, multiple databases. So flexible repartitioning, but allows me to scale to multiple hundreds and hundreds of nodes with no downtime, no transactionally consistent, no interruption to the user. I've got a whole presentation on SQL Federation on how that works. But it's so this is basically taking the scalability and from the middle tier and placing it in the database. So allow me to scale at the database level with very little code and without any logic in the application. So the application really it doesn't care and shouldn't care what's going on the back end, but allow me to split and create multiple nodes, multiple partitions in the database very easily without interrupting the application, without making any changes to the application, and without caching anything at the application level. Right? So it's all done at the database level. Very easy, very quick to do, and allows you to scale, again, to hundreds and hundreds of nodes. So with that, let me show very quick. We talked about the data sync. I'm not going to create a whole I'm not going to create a whole data sync topology, but the reason I want to show this is because I'm going to just close this. So I mentioned earlier that there was 2 portals. This is the new portal, but notice that a lot of the services like data sync and reporting are not here yet. They're coming. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to log out of this portal and go into the new portal, which is windows.azure.com. Right? Again, it's based on the live account, so I'm going to log in. But this is the this is the current portal, and notice here again it's the same thing. This is Silverlight based, but notice here that I've got reporting. This is where I can provision a report server. And again, it's very simple as, click, I didn't want to do that. I'm going to create a new report server and basically pick which subscription it's in and what region it is in. So I'm going to say South Central. Next, give it an admin. Right, so same thing. Whoops. Let's do that. Okay, and then finish. And within just a matter of minutes or less, my server is provisioned. This will take a few seconds. Right? So there's my server. Right? And there's my report link. So I have no reports or anything like that. But now, again, to illustrate here, when I go and do my report development, my report service URL, when in, like, for example, bids in Visual Studio in bids, when I develop my report and it says where's my report server, that's the link. I pass it right there. Done. So again, instead of just deploying to on-prem, I deploy to SQL Azure and I'm all ready to go. Right? And I use the same tools to view and develop. But really quick, let me show the data sync. And the data sync is, again, very easy to do a data synchronization. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into here. I already have my data sync server provisioned, but to do data synchronization, I can very easily walk through a wizard, so synchronize between on-prem SQL databases and SQL Azure, or between SQL Azure. But the other way to do it is just go create, and what I've got here is a sync group, and all I have to do is very simply provision my hub, which the hub must be a SQL Azure database. And then any other spoke databases, which can be SQL Azure or SQL Server on-prem, and then define the sync schedule, the conflict resolution, who wins, the hub or spoke, and then define the data set, which is what data am I going to replicate and synchronize. So very simple, and it's very simple as just saying, okay, connect to my SQL Azure database, click add, another database, click add, very simple, and then if I'm going to connect to SQL Server, where's my SQL Server on-prem? Very simple, very easy, very quick, and then I can start synchronizing all day long. I do have through here. I do have the log viewer. The log viewer actually allows me to see what's going on, any errors, any transactions that are happening. Now, because this is built on the sync framework, it does add those sync tables to each database, which does add overhead to all your databases. They are working on this to eliminate that because it does add overhead to your database. So they are working on getting rid of that overhead in those tables. But again, it's very easy to set up and very quick. So, all right, with that, let me, I'll stop and take questions, but let me really quick just show you the billing rates for this because it's very, in December they lowered rates drastically. So Again, for 0 to 100 megabytes, it's a flat $5 a month. 100 gigabytes to 100 meg to 1 gigabyte, it's a flat $10 per month. There are, and then beyond that, it gets to $9.99 for the first gigabyte, and then additional for after that. So there is some math we have to do to figure out how much it's going to cost you per month per database. But again, at most, it's you're not paying a lot for databases, right? There are data transfer for costs for out. But there are no transaction charges. So there's no charges for actually, there's no query charges, no charges for executing a stored procedure, there are no transaction charges. It's just a flat fee per month. So, all right, with that, I will turn it over to questions. Hopefully this was helpful, and I'm happy to talk in more detail if people want to stick around.
Okay, great. Yes, one of the main questions we've been getting asked is the session recorded? And yes, it is recorded. It will be posted on pragmaticworks.com under past webinars by tomorrow. So if you missed any part, you can check back. Here's the first question. What big data applications are on SQL Azure? Can I spin up a Hadoop instance? And does Microsoft Data Marketplace integrate easily?
Absolutely. So if you go to let me step out here a second, and I think it's is it Hadoop on Azure.com? Yep. Right. So Hadoop on Azure.com. This allows you to set up Hadoop on Azure, and you can use a SQL database, SQL Azure database as a data source. You can use Azure Storage as a data source. So I would start there.
Okay, great. Our next question is, do I get to use SQL Data Sync with the rates mentioned on the current slide?
I'm sorry, can I use Data Sync with what?
The rates mentioned on the previous slide.
Oh, yes. So data. Let me just say this. So as long as data, so there's no cost if you're synchronizing between SQL Azure and SQL Azure, right? As long as the data stays in the data center, there's no cost. As soon as data leaves, like I showed here, as long as data leaves the data center, so there's no ingress, but there's no cost for putting data into the data center, but there is cost for data leaving the data center. So yeah, those transaction charges will, now this actually is, that's not correct. I do need to change that. That's actually, I think, now to 10.5 cents per gigabyte. Whoops. I think that's 10.5. I'd have to look. 10 and I think it's 10.5 cents per gigabyte now. It's not 14. They actually lowered that cost, so it's much cheaper now for the U.S. But that only applies to data leaving the data center. If you're doing data synchronization and the data stays in SQL Azure, that's free all day long.
Okay, great. Our next question is, will Power Review be available in SQL Azure? And if so, when?
That's not there yet. You can use Power Review on-prem to connect to SQL Azure, right? So that you can do that all day long. I don't have a date as to when that'll be available in. So I know they're working on a lot of the BI story because obviously reporting is there from a BI story. The question we get asked a lot is when will integration services and analysis services and all those great features be available in SQL Azure. That is coming. I don't have a date for that, but they are working on that. But I'll try to, if you ping me, I will try to see if I can find out a date or at least a ballpark time frame.
Okay, great. We have quite a few more questions. We have and more keep coming in. So unfortunately, we are out of time, but I'm going to go ahead and pull this report, and I'll send it to you, Scott. And if you'd like to respond, it gives the questions and the email addresses of the questioner askers.
Yep.
And
you send me that. You send me that. I will answer all the questions and send it back.
Okay, you were very popular. You had about, oh man, I'd say a total of about 50 questions. So people loved it.
Let me do this. Let me. There's my email address.
Perfect.
If you'll send me those questions, I'll answer those, and if anybody else has any others, there's my email address.
Okay, perfect. I think you're going to get several requests for your slide deck, so people really enjoyed the presentation.
I did want to bring that up. So this slide deck is one of the great tools for learning this stuff is the Windows Azure Training Kit, and this slide and about 4 other SQL Azure slides are in that training kit. So if you go up to MSDN and search for Windows Azure Training Kit, you will find this. It's a downloadable training kit that has presentations, tutorials, hands-on labs, demos, you name it, everything you want to know about Azure. I would wait about a week because we're about to do an update. So maybe next Monday or early next week, download, look for that. This deck and about 4 other SQL Azure decks will be in there. So this stuff is available directly to if you'd like.
Okay, great. Awesome. All right, well, thank you so much, everyone, for attending this, and thank you, Scott, for a wonderful session. Again, you can view the recording of this on our website by tomorrow. So thank you, everyone, and have a great weekend.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.